Please be seated.
The court is back in session. You may continue, Mr. Šešelj.
Kada su neke lokacije
when some of the locations pursuant to a ruling of the trial chamber were removed from the indictment, the prosecution was given permission to present evidence relating to these locations, possibly within the context of JCE or
po tim lokacijama
state of mind. However, the prosecution presented evidence relating to these locations only as crime bases, but that was not permissible according to the trial chamber's ruling. And based on the evidence on crime bases, they are subsequently trying to draw certain conclusions. However, these locations cannot confirm the existence of the JCE, nor can they confirm that it constitutes a universal pattern of crimes perpetrated by Serbian forces in various places. Let's first look at Western Slavonia. There was a spontaneous uprising of the Serbian people in Slavonia against the Tudjman's regime, which was prompted by the violation of the rights of Serbs because there were threats. The Serb people felt insecure. There was an atmosphere of fear and angst, etc. This Serbian uprising had been in progress for more than 2 months before the first Serbian volunteers arrived there. The JNA didn't have enough troops to cover the whole area, and that was the reason why volunteers were being sent there. The volunteers were dispatched from the JNA barracks in Bubanj Potok, already issued with uniforms and weapons. They were transported in convoys of buses and escorted by military police. Volunteers of the SRS fought there bravely, and there is not a single shred of evidence that any of them committed any crimes. The prosecution brought false witnesses here, even witnesses who were in power of the Serbian Autonomous District of Slavonia, who tried to clear their names because they remained living in various Croatian towns. You had an opportunity to see how successfully I shattered those witnesses and how I managed to establish a link between them and certain crimes. Since those were protected witnesses, I cannot mention their names now, but hopefully you remember who they were. And of course, I don't remember their numbers because it is only stupid people who have no problems memorizing numbers. The crimes occurred spontaneously after the defenses fell down as a result of a major Croatian offensive. The crime in Vocin, as you saw, was the crime whose perpetrators were identified by Croats themselves. The OTP played a video clip here in which we saw a Croatian officer saying that this crime was committed by White Eagles, and upon that the prosecutor said those were Šešeljevci. How is that possible? The prosecutor says that I was in Benkovac and I explained to our volunteers that our members were wearing helmets in Vukovar, and instead of the five-pointed star they put stickers with White Eagle images. Now, the prosecutor, either intentionally or out of ignorance, is mixing up White Eagles and other emblems. A two-headed eagle has been the symbol of Serbs ever since the Middle Ages. It had been adopted from the Byzantine tradition, and the two-headed eagle was worn on the Serbian uniforms in the 19th century, during the First World War and during the Second World War II. That was the emblem worn by the Royal Army commanded by Draža Mihajlović.
The two-headed white eagle is still in the coat of arms of Serbia. It's on the official flag of Serbia. Is that also part of a paramilitary formation of the White Eagles? I was explaining to our volunteers in Benkovac and other fighting men. You remember when I said I'm used to being listened to carefully, to having others shut up when I speak. The prosecutor calls it a display of authority, but what can I do about it? From my earliest stage, I've always been a leader, and in every group I've ever been into, I've been a leader. From childhood play with other children to later days. But I was explaining to our soldiers that it's necessary for them to wear helmets, especially in Benkovac, Lika and other areas. Many soldiers were killed or seriously wounded by explosions that detonated on the rocks around them, and then the rocks hit them in the head. People were reluctant, by the way, to wear helmets because the helmets had the five-pointed star. I told them to cover the star with the eagle sticker and wear the helmet nevertheless. Even I wore the helmet from the moment when officers told me what this failure to wear helmets was doing to the soldiers. Now the prosecution is trying, based on that, to identify our volunteers with the group of White Eagles. There were some elements together with our men in the liberation of Zvornik. They had come from Kraljevo and they were with our volunteers until the fall of Kulagrad, and then they dispersed. From 26 July on in Zvornik, there was no unit called White Eagles. Did I say Vukovar? I have to check the record. No, it's fine. It's Zvornik. In Vocin, the Catholic Church was blown up. But it exploded because it housed a depot, a stock of ammunition. It was vacant. Somebody decided to store ammunition there, and during the Croatian offensive, maybe somebody intentionally caused the explosion, or a stray grenade did. I don't know. Was it proper to store ammunition in a place of worship is another matter. But that is why the church exploded. The volunteers of the Serbian Radical Party were not there at all. They were mounting a blocking defense in a village called Makšićka Šagovina. It had some tactical importance. The SRS volunteers made it possible to evacuate all the civilians from there, thanks to their defense. 11 SRS volunteers were killed there in a single day. Some were wounded, others were captured, and those who were captured, although they had suffered a lot in Croatian prisons, were freed later, and not a single one of them was prosecuted or charged with any crime. So there is no pattern of conduct from which you could conclude that I sent volunteers somewhere to commit crimes, that I instigated, ordered, planned, or supported these crimes, because there is absolutely no contact between the crimes and the volunteers. Now about Šamac. A group of soldiers came from the training center in Bajduš, in Paizoš. They were sent there by the JNA. There was a volunteer known as Debeli there, and a part of our volunteers who had fought in Slavonia previously. But they did not go there. They did not arrive there as a volunteer unit of the Serbian Radical Party. They came there as a JNA unit, which was part of the 17th Tactical Group, and they fought in Šamac as such. And nobody can ascribe a single crime to Srećko Radovanović. What is being attributed to Lugar is probably true. Lugar has been dead for a long time. We can't examine him, but at that time Lugar was not a member of the Serbian Radical Party. He became a member later, but he was soon expelled sometime in 1993 because he had slapped the president of the municipal board of the Serbian Radical Party in Kragujevac, Jovo Savić, and the entire city of Kragujevac knows that Jovo Savić, who was the president of the municipal board of the SRS, and that Lugar slapped him, and that's why he was expelled. Do I care what you are going to say about that? What you are going to think about that? Or what some other town in Serbia is going to think? Kragujevac knows what happened. Concerning Brčko, we didn't send any volunteers from Belgrade there. Mirko Blagojević was there with the volunteers of the SRS from Bijeljina after Bijeljina was liberated. And you cannot ascribe to a single crime to Mirko Blagojević. He even came to the POW camp, asked for a certain number of prisoners to exchange them for some of his soldiers or dead soldiers. And he got them against receipt. And he brought biscuits and sweets to the detained Muslims. Then later that evening, somebody came and mistreated those Muslims, and you decide that it was Mirko Blagojević. During the day, he was distributing food and treats to them, and the same night he came back to mistreat them. Where is your logic? In the area of Brčko, they did not have volunteers, but at the time the corridor was being opened, there was Branislav Vakic and some others. I can't remember all of them. Their task was to open up the corridor to link the western part of the Republic of Serbia, Serbian Krajina, with the western part of Republika Srpska with Serbia. That corridor was a lifeline for the Serbian people. The army of Republika Srpska was involved, and the army of the Republic of Serbian Krajina under the command of Milan Martic, etc. Bijeljina. The greatest number of absurd statements have been heard on Bijeljina, and the prosecution is making closing arguments as if we had never heard all of that, as if all of his witnesses had not been absolutely demolished here in the courtroom. They keep saying that I was sitting there in some cafe saying how all the Muslims need to be cleansed from Bijeljina, whereas a Muslim was sitting at the table next door, next to ours, overhearing all that. Now, what must be the IQ of Mr. Markusson if he can't make this distinction? I don't know what the difference between his IQ and mine is. Maybe it's in his favor. How stupid do I have to be to sit with Mirko Blagojevic in a cafe and discuss with him openly what we were going to do with the Muslims? Such rubbish. And we established here, based on prosecution witnesses' testimony, because you didn't allow me to present a single of my own witnesses, you violated Article 21 of the ICTY statute and did not give me funds to present my defense. So based on prosecution witnesses, we established how the war started in Bijeljina. One Muslim on horseback was going to throw a hand grenade on the cafe called Serbia. Mirko Blagojevic was standing outside that cafe, grabbed his pistol, and as the Muslim was about to throw the grenade, he shot him in the leg. That Muslim was sitting here in the witness box. And all I wanted to know about that was how the horse fed. Thank God, the horse was uninjured. But that Muslim, in all this excitement, forgot to activate the grenade before throwing it, so it didn't explode. And that's when the shooting started between the Serbian cafe called Serbia and the Muslim cafe, whose name I forget, in the center of Bijeljina. And in this settlement of accounts, the Serbs prevailed. In the fighting itself, Arkan's role was negligible. But in what happened after the fighting, that's another matter. In the Serbian public, I attacked Arkan when no one else dared to, because he had taken a fire brigade vehicle from Bijeljina worth several 100,000 Deutschmark, perhaps 1 million tractors, and God knows how much more equipment. Nobody in Serbia dared lift a finger against Arkan. Not the government, not the police, no one, because he was involved with underground structures, mafia. He had the protection of Radovan Stojičić Bađa. Nobody did anything against him. Muslims could have prevailed in Bijeljina, but in Bijeljina, apart from the few Muslims killed by Arkan When he came in, there was no expulsion of Muslims. Muslims joined the unit of Mirko Blagojević. Later on, 2 battalions or 2 brigades were formed, comprising Muslims, and they were deployed on the line facing Orašje, which is a Croatian settlement. The expulsion of Muslims was Mauser's idea. And the idea of that man of Arkans, that major, what's his name? And that's when we started a conflict with them. The prosecution showed this document by Mirko Blagojević condemning the mistreatment of Muslims. The prosecution found that document. I would not have been able to find it, or it would have taken me a lot of trouble. So where is the common pattern of conduct? Where is the JCE? The prosecution is saying now that I'm distancing myself from people in the SRS or the volunteers. No, I'm not distancing myself. I am still proud of my own role in the war and of theirs. But I have to clear certain facts up. And the most important facts include where we sent volunteers from Belgrade and where we did not. You see how perfidious the prosecution is when it comes to Zvornik. We had an old Muslim woman here in the courtroom whose husband and 2 sons were killed by Arkans men. She came, she was very emotional, and she had only great hatred for me. You could see that. However, she described the events very truthfully. Arkans men broke into that settlement, took the men away, and executed about 20 Muslim men. And she describes nicely how they went from there to the center of Zvornik, and how somewhere later on they were met by Šešelj's men, how they took Arkan's men somewhere and tried to dissuade them. Then they took the Muslims somewhere else and told them to calm down, that they would protect them, whereas one of them broke a shop window, took some chocolates and distributed them to Muslim children. And the Muslim woman then said, yes, he was telling us they were not all the same, but how do we know that? I don't know how she's thinking. That's another matter. But I am proud of these details that speak volumes about the kind of people our volunteers were. The prosecution is also trying to insult me, saying that I'm a quasi-soldier, that I'm this and that. This is a quasi-prosecution. These are quasi-prosecutors, whereas I am no quasi-soldier. I am a soldier inasmuch as I have done my compulsory military service. And from the first day of war, I placed myself at the service of my fatherland. And I am still a soldier of my homeland in this courtroom, in The Hague, a soldier of Serbia, ready to die for my homeland, Serbia. But you don't understand what that means. You don't understand a thing. Because you have a totally different system of values. That system of values is decadent. That system of values is dehumanized, based on pure individualism, whereas we Serbs have an individual and a collective conscience, and we jealously guard both.
Ovde tužilaštvo govori
Here the prosecution speaks of Greater Serbia. And of course, I am fighting for Greater Serbia. That is my personal aim and the aim of the Serbian Radical Party. But it has never been the goal of Slobodan Milošević, or Veljko Kadijević, or Blagoje Adžić, or Borislav Jović, or Radovan Karadžić, or Milan Babić, or Milan Martić, or Jovica Stanišić, or Franko Simatović. Many of them are still crying for Yugoslavia, for the old Yugoslavia. And you cannot artificially portray it as our common design. It's my design, the design of my party, whose main founder and leader I am. And the prosecution keeps insisting that we were fighting for a homogeneous Greater Serbia. That there is no basis for that in any document. When did any of us say that we wanted a homogeneous Greater Serbia? You invoke Stevan Voljević. Stevan Voljević was not a leader of the Ravna Gora movement. He was a prominent personality, but his personal opinion placed no obligation on anyone. Draža Mihajlović fought for the restoration of Yugoslavia, and he said that at the Congress of 1944, Draža Mihajlović had Chetnik voivodas of both Orthodox and Catholic faith. The Catholic voivoda Bartulović was executed by the partisans sometime towards the end of the war. Near Split, Đuro Vilović from Makarska was convicted together with Draža Mihajlović and spent time in prison in Sremska Mitrovica. A great author, Mustafa Mulalović, a Muslim, tried together with Draža Mihajlović. Ismet Pupovac. So many Chetnik voivodas. The prosecution acts as if they had never seen in the documents they included into evidence themselves the program of the Serbian Freedom Movement, the Serbian Chetnik Movement, the Serbian Radical Party, that we are fighting for a unified Serbian state that would include all Serbian lands, and then we enumerate those Serbian lands. The current Serbia, Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. When I say current Serbia, that means Kosovo and Metohija and Vojvodina, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Dubrovnik, Lika, Kordun, Banija, Slavonia, Baranja. And we talk about the brotherhood and unity among Serb Orthodox people, Serb Catholic people, Serb Muslim, etc. You admit that into evidence, you tender it into evidence yourself, and then you go on talking nonsense. What homogeneous Greater Serbia? In addition to insisting on unity, regardless of faith and confession, we guarantee all the rights to everyone, even minorities. But we also expect them to be loyal to the state of Serbia. You mentioned here my statements concerning Kosovo, and in his dissenting opinion, under Rule 98 bis, Judge Antonetti did as well. Why didn't you include it in the indictment? What do they mean now if they're not in the indictment? Although they date back to the time outside the indictment, and they were made in locations outside the indictment. Who made that mistake? Maybe it would have been easier for you to make the judgment if you had included them. What do you want to do now? Rewrite the indictment again? It can't be done, although anything goes here. We Serbs will never give up on the liberation of Kosovo and Metohija. To us, it is sacred Serbian land. We will never, ever give up. And all Albanians loyal to Serbia will be able to live in Kosovo. And not only that, the entire northern Albania, as it is today, stretches over Serbian land. The first Serbian state covered the area of the current northern Albania. It was the kingdom of Časlav, Stefan Vojislav, Jovan Vladimir. Do you think we'll give up on that? The Serbs freed Skadar in the First Balkan War. The Montenegrin Serbs tried first, but they didn't make it. Many of them died. Then the Serbian troops came with artillery and Skadar fell. And then the great powers forced us to pull back from Skadar and from the Greater Albania. Great Western powers created Albania as it is today, and that state will exist until those countries still have all the power. When that stops, when they lose that power, things will go back to what they used to be. The first leader of Skadar was Esad Pasha, an Albanian, but also an Ottoman general. And in that fighting, more than 30,000 Serbs died, most of them from Montenegro. When the Serbian artillery arrived, when they got involved, negotiations about the surrender of Skadar began. And it was agreed that the Ottoman army, with all its infantry weaponry, should leave Skadar. Only heavy artillery remained, if my memory serves me well. And when the Turks, including a large percentage of Albanians, started leaving Skadar, the Serbs organized a gauntlet with military music playing.
I svojnom muzikom su ispraćeni.
And they were sent off to military music. That is Serbian military honor. Now, we had those communist dregs involved in this war. And we also had Serbs who had lost their sense of military honor. And that's not something we could be proud of. Nevertheless, the fact remains that others started to violate the rules of customs of war first, to commit crimes against humanity first, that others were much more involved and got away scot-free. Which Muslims did you try here? When you look at it, nobody. And where are the Serbs from Sarajevo? Where are 200,000 Serbs from Sarajevo? Who drove them out? Do you think they just up and left their apartments and houses? How many Serbs were killed in Kazani, in Pofalici, in many other places in Sarajevo? Where are the Serbs from Tuzla? Where are the Serbs from Zagreb? According to official statistics, there were 600,000 Serbs in the former federal unit of Croatia. Where are they? How many of them remain? Who was held responsible among the Croats and Muslims for that? No one. Yes, you came down hard on Bosnian Croats to some extent, so that they lose all their enthusiasm for the recreation of Croatian Bosnia. That was your main goal. But out of Croats, you tried only 2 men, Gotovina and Markac. It was the easiest way out for you and the then Croatian authorities to sacrifice those 2. Which Croatian minister did you try? Which high-ranking military commander was tried? Not one. Why not Tudjman? Why not Ali Izetbegovic? In the attack against the western part of Krajina in 1995, 11 Croatian commanders were involved. They attacked from 11 different directions. And you went after those 2 alone. I'm not defending them. I don't want to defend anyone, although I have my prisoners' solidarity with all of them, regardless of nation, be they from Congo, Rwanda, Liberia. Never mind. I'm always on the side of the prisoner vis-à-vis the prosecution and the judges. But where is that justice that you are pursuing? What kind of justice are you pursuing? You want to achieve reconciliation in the Balkans with these trials? There will be no reconciliation. You added fuel to the flames of those passions with the trials. Do you think the Serb people will be reconciled to the fact that you are trying their highest military and police officials, whereas others go unpunished? Never. Never. Reconciliation cannot be achieved in this way. This is how you pour fuel on new animosity and new conflicts. And the Pax Americana that came after this war will not last long. It will last as long as the American empire, the American hegemony and domination. You see that it's now on very shaky legs, on thin ice.
The Hague Tribunal, instead of being the basis of a new international law and international justice, it will actually become a mockery of international judiciary system, and nobody will be glad to refer to the precedent that were established here and the judgments that were issued and passed here. Because it was not justice that was administered here. It was political interest that prevailed in this tribunal.
Thank you. Mr. Šešelj, it's now 6:30. You can stop now. If you want to have a rest, we can reconvene tomorrow morning. Or if you wish, we can continue until 7, as you please.
You have probably sensed that I have become a bit lost of words. I was embarrassed to say that I was tired, that I wish to have a break and continue tomorrow morning. But it would be a good idea. We should do that.
Yeah. Very well. We shall reconvene tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, we will be.